Somerset, September 1811. The trunk was half full when he found her. Not searching. He hadn't been searching. He had been walking the east corridor of Dunover Hall at 11:15 on a Wednesday night because sleep had become unreliable and the house had become very large and very quiet in ways he had not previously measured. He had passed her door because it was on the way to the library, and the light beneath it was wrong. Too bright. Too active. The kind of light that meant movement and decision rather than reading or rest. He opened the door without knocking, which was the first honest thing he had done regarding Sable Marin in 6 years of marriage. She was kneeling beside the trunk. Her traveling dress was laid across the bed. Her writing case was already packed, which meant the letters had been written, which meant this wasn't impulse. This was the end of a sequence he had not observed while it was happening, and was now seeing only in its final position. She looked up at him. She did not stand. She did not explain. She held his gaze with the expression he had spent those years failing to earn, and was now seeing for the first time, the one that had nothing left to manage. "Sable," he said. "I have written to my brother," she said. "The carriage is arranged for first light." He looked at the trunk. He looked at the writing case. He looked at the woman kneeling on the floor of the bedroom she had occupied for half a decade in his house, in his name, at his family's table. And he understood with the sudden, devastating clarity of a man who has been looking at accounts and missing the figures, that she had been leaving for a very long time, and he had only just arrived. But that was Wednesday, and to understand Wednesday, you would need to understand the years that preceded it, and the September evening in 1805 when Sable Marin became the Duke of Ashworth's last remaining option, and accepted the position with the composure of a woman who understood precisely what last meant, and had decided it was enough. It was not enough. But that would take years to prove, and the proof would cost them both more than either of them had budgeted for. The Ashworth situation, as the county referred to it with the delicacy Somerset applied to matters involving rank and money and the absence of alternatives, was straightforward. The Duke needed a wife. He had needed a wife for 3 years, during which time he had pursued, in order, Lady Clarion Firth, Miss Jessamine Holt, and the Honorable Dinah Welford. Lady Clarion had married an earl. Miss Holt had declined through her father with the particular firmness of a family that had formed an opinion about the Ashworth temperament and was not interested in revising it. The Honorable Dinah Welford had accepted, then retracted, in circumstances the county discussed with the energy reserved for situations that were both painful and interesting. The Duke had emerged from this sequence with an estate that required an heir, a reputation for difficult courtship, and the particular stillness of a man who had stopped expecting rooms to go well. Sable Marin was the daughter of Sir Haddon Marin, whose baronetcy was 3 generations old, and whose fortune was 2. She was the second daughter. Her elder sister Cressida had been the one the county expected to make the significant match, being taller and more comfortable in the specific performance that society required. Sable was quieter. She read more than she spoke. She managed her father's household accounts with a precision that found numbers more reliable than conversation. She was not, by any standard the county applied, the obvious choice for a duchess. She was, by September of 1805, the available one. The interview was conducted at Marin House on a Thursday afternoon in the drawing room that overlooked the orchard, with Sir Haddon present in the corner chair and the September light coming through the tall windows in the particular way that made everything in the room look temporary. The Duke arrived with his steward, and the manner of a man completing a necessary transaction. He was not unkind. He was not warm. He was a man who had offered warmth to 3 women in sequence, and had received from 2 of them rejection, and from the third something worse, and had reorganized his approach accordingly. Sable sat across from him in her second-best afternoon dress, which was dove gray and well-made, and said nothing except that the woman wearing it had other things to think about besides fabric. She watched him with the attentive stillness she brought to everything, the quality her sister called patience and her father called intelligence, and that was, in truth, neither. It was the habit of a woman who had learned early that the most important information was usually in what people did not say. The Duke said what he had come to say. He required a wife. The estate required continuity. He had been advised that Miss Marin was a woman of sound judgment and appropriate standing, and he wished to propose an arrangement that would be beneficial to both families. He did not say, "You are my fourth choice." He did not need to. Somerset was a county with a long memory, and Sable had been paying attention to that memory since the Clarion Firth business 3 years ago. She looked at him across the drawing room. She looked at the quality of his stillness, which was not calm, but the particular rigidity of a man holding something in place. She looked at the way he addressed his remarks to a point slightly to the left of her face, which told her that he had prepared this speech and was delivering it to the version of her he had composed in advance, rather than the one who was actually sitting in front of him. She thought about what it meant to be proposed to by a man who had not once, in the 12 minutes he had been speaking, asked her a question. She thought about the word arrangement and what it excluded. She said yes. She said it with the composed clarity of a woman who had made a decision and was not interested in performing uncertainty about it. She said it looking directly at him, which was the first time he had been required to meet her eyes since entering the room, and something in his expression shifted when she did, not toward warmth, but toward the recognition that she was a specific person and not a category, which was, she understood, as much as he was currently able to offer. "Thank you, Miss Marin," he said. She heard what lived inside the thank you. She heard the relief and the exhaustion beneath the relief, and the particular gratitude of a man who had been bracing for a fourth refusal and had received instead a calm, clear yes from a woman in a dove-gray dress who was looking at him as though she had already begun the work of understanding him. She filed the sound of it. She would need it later, she suspected, on the days when the arrangement felt like exactly what it was. "You are welcome, Your Grace," she said. Her father, in the corner chair, said nothing, but he looked at his daughter with the expression of a man who understood what she had just agreed to carry, and was not certain she had priced it correctly. They were married in October at the village church 3 miles from Donover Hall, in a ceremony that was correctly attended and precisely appropriate, and contained within it no moment that anyone present would later describe as joy. Sable wore ivory. Her sister Cressida stood beside her with the expression of a woman who had opinions about this marriage and had been asked, firmly and once, not to share them. Her brother, Taryn, who had come from London, where he managed the modest Marin investments with more competence than the family's position suggested, shook the Duke's hand with the grip of a man conducting an assessment he intended to revisit. The county attended because the county attended Ashworth weddings, and because there was a quality to this particular match that people wanted to observe firsthand. The quality of a question the county had not yet answered about whether this woman understood what she had walked into. Sable moved through the wedding breakfast at Donover Hall, reading the social landscape, with the attention she had developed since she was old enough to notice that her sister received the warmth in a room and she received the respect, and that these were not the same currency. She noted that the Duke looked at her twice during the breakfast. Once when she was speaking with his steward about the household schedule. Once when she laughed at something Terence said, a real laugh, small and unstaged, and the Duke had turned toward the sound with the reflexive attention of a man hearing something unexpected. He had looked away before she caught him. She caught him anyway. That evening, alone in the rooms that were now hers at Donover Hall, she sat at the writing desk and did what she always did when she needed to understand a situation. She took inventory. She had a husband who was courteous and distant and carried a wound he had organized into a manor. She had a house that was beautiful and well run and contained within it the particular silence of a place where someone had decided that quiet was safer than risk. She had a position that gave her access to everything except the one thing that would have made the position bearable, which was the sense that she had been chosen rather than settled for. She closed the inventory. She put away the pen. She looked at the bedroom door that connected her rooms to his, which was closed, and which she understood would remain closed until she decided what to do about it, because the man on the other side of it had spent 3 years learning not to open doors and was not going to start now. She thought, I will make this work. She thought, I will make myself indispensable, and he will see me eventually, and the seeing will be enough. She was wrong about enough, but she would not discover that for several years, and by the time she did, the inventory would be considerably longer, and the cost of being wrong would be considerably higher than a closed door. The first year taught her the house. Dunover Hall was a property of considerable age and moderate chaos, the kind of estate that had been managed by generations of stewards with varying degrees of attention, and the accumulated result was a household that functioned through habit and repetition rather than design. Sable learned it by inventory. She walked every room in the first month. She reviewed every account in the second. By the third month, she had identified where money was being lost to inattention, where the tenant arrangements had not been revised since the previous Duke's time, and she had formed a plan that was detailed and practical and would require the Duke's approval on 4 specific points. She presented the plan on a Tuesday morning in December in the study where he conducted estate business, with the household ledgers organized and annotated in her hand. He listened. He read the annotations. He approved the 4 points without objection, which surprised her, and asked one question about the tenant rents that confirmed he had understood the plan completely, which surprised her more. This is thorough work, he said. It is necessary work, she said. The household has been running at a loss in 3 areas that are entirely correctable. He looked at her for a moment, with an expression she had not yet catalogued. Not the courteous distance, not the reflexive formality. Something that lived closer to the surface than either of those, and that disappeared before she could examine it. Proceed as you see fit, he said. You have the household's authority in all domestic matters. She heard what he had given her. She also heard what he had not given her. The household's authority was not the same as his confidence. Domestic matters was a boundary drawn around a territory he was willing to cede, because it did not cost him anything personal. She was being granted jurisdiction, not partnership. She took the jurisdiction. She made it work. By the end of the first year, the household accounts were running clean, and 3 members of the county had commented independently to Sir Haddon that the new Duchess of Ashworth was remarkably capable, which Sir Haddon had received with the expression of a man who had been aware of this for approximately 24 years. The second year taught her the county. She learned who mattered and who believed they mattered. She learned that Lady Hartfield, wife of the Viscount, was the social axis around which Somerset rotated. She learned that Mrs. Brevet was kind, that Colonel Alsted was tedious, and that the Fentons at Cray House collected grievances the way other families collected silver. She learned that the Duke introduced her at every occasion as the Duchess, never as Sable, never with the inflection that suggested the name meant anything beyond the title. She learned, in the second year, to stop noticing. The third year taught her the pattern. He worked in the mornings. He wrote in the afternoons. He dined with her at opposite ends of the long table, with the conversation of colleagues and the distance of strangers. He remembered her birthday, with a gift selected, she suspected, by his steward, because it had the quality of a thing researched rather than known. He did not open the connecting door. She did not open it either. having decided in the first month that the opening would need to come from him. By the end of the third year, she had stopped expecting the door to open. She had not stopped listening for it, and the difference between those two things was the precise shape of her unhappiness. The fourth and fifth years compressed into a single long season of competence and silence. She was, by every external measure, an exemplary duchess. The sixth year began in January, with a frost that killed the early planting, and a letter from her sister Cressida that contained, among the usual news from Dorset, a sentence that lodged in her thinking and would not dislodge. Cressida wrote, "I hope you are happy, dearest, and not merely accomplished. As I sometimes suspect, you have confused the two." Sable read this sentence 4 times. She set the letter on the desk in the Dunover library, beside the estate accounts and the tenant correspondence, and she looked at all of it, the evidence of years of extraordinary competence, and she thought about the word happy, and when she had last applied it to herself honestly and could not identify the date. She thought about the connecting door. She thought about years of listening for it and the precise moment, somewhere in the 4th year, when she had realized that she was not waiting for him to see her anymore. She was waiting to decide whether being unseen was something she could sustain for the remaining decades of her life. She had not yet decided. But Cressida's sentence had moved the question from the place where she kept things she was not examining to the place where she kept things that required action, and the transfer, once made, could not be reversed. The thing that changed the pattern arrived in February, wearing the disguise of county business. The Somerset Charity Commission for Tenant Relief had been proposed by Lady Hartfield. In January, Sable had been appointed because Lady Hartfield had observed, over 5 years, that the Duchess was the only woman at the table who understood accounts well enough to manage the fund without supervision. The Duke had been appointed because his participation was not optional in the way Lady Hartfield used the word. They had not served on anything together since the wedding. The commission was the first occasion requiring them to sit in the same room, working on the same problem, with neither of them having a social performance to hide behind. The first meeting was at Hartfield House, 8 members around the long table, with Lady Hartfield at the head, and the fund accounts spread before them. Sable had reviewed the accounts the previous evening and had identified 3 problems with the proposed disbursement schedule that no one else had caught, because no one else on the commission read numbers the way she did. She presented the problems clearly, specifically, without performance, in the voice she used for work, which was different from her dinner voice and her county voice, and which the Duke, she realized as she was speaking, had never heard. He was sitting across the table. He was watching her with an expression she recognized from the study in the first December, the one that lived closer to the surface than courtesy, and that she had not seen since. She finished the presentation. Lady Hartfield said, "The Duchess has identified precisely the issues I had hoped someone would identify, and saved us considerable difficulty." After the meeting, in the corridor, he fell into step beside her. "The disbursement analysis," he said. "You had reviewed the accounts before the meeting." "I review all accounts before all meetings," she said. "It is a habit." "It is more than a habit," he said. He paused. The pause was long enough to contain something, and short enough that the something remained undelivered. "The next meeting is in 2 weeks," he said. "I would like to review the accounts together beforehand, to ensure we are presenting a unified position." She thought about the word together, and how many years it had been since he had applied it to anything involving the two of them. She thought about the word unified, and what it meant when a man who had spent years maintaining a careful separation proposed it in a corridor about charitable disbursements. "Of course," she said, "Tuesday morning would be convenient." The Tuesday meetings became a pattern. They met in the Dunover study at 9, with the commission accounts between them, and they worked through the figures with the focused attention of two people who were both very good with numbers and had discovered, deep into a marriage built on arrangement, that this was the first thing they had in common that neither of them had known about. He asked her questions, real questions, about her methodology, about her reasoning, and she answered with the directness she brought to all numerical work. And he listened with the complete attention she had spent years learning to live without, and that she was now receiving overfund allocations, and the irony of this wasn't lost on her. By the fourth Tuesday, the meetings had extended past the commission work. They talked about the estate accounts. They talked about the tenant situation. They talked, on one occasion, about a book on agricultural reform that he had on the study shelf and that she had read in the library without telling him. And the conversation lasted 40 minutes beyond the scheduled time, and neither of them acknowledged that it had. She learned one other thing. On the sixth Tuesday, when she was explaining the revised disbursement model and had leaned across the desk to point at a figure in the ledger, he had looked at her hand on the page, the hand with the ink stain on the third finger that she never quite managed to remove, and his expression had done something she had never seen it do. It had softened. Not much, not visibly, to anyone who had not spent years studying the man's face for evidence of interior life, but enough that she saw it and noted it and thought about it for the rest of the week with the disciplined attention of a woman who had been managing hope for a very long time and was not going to mishandle it now. March arrived with sustained rain. The eastern tenant cottages, the ones Sable had identified in her first-year inventory as needing structural work, began to fail. The roof on the Calloway cottage collapsed on a Thursday morning. No one was injured. By Friday afternoon, her survey confirmed 4 of the 6 remaining cottages were in similar condition. She engaged builders, revised the budget, arranged temporary housing, and did all of it alone, because estate management was her territory. It occurred to the Duke. He appeared at the eastern cottages on Saturday morning, on foot, in a coat that was practical rather than appropriate, which was a detail she noted and stored away. "I read the survey report," he said by way of greeting. "I left it on the study desk," she said. "I was not certain you would see it." "I see everything you leave on the study desk," he said. She looked at him. He was looking at the collapsed roof with the expression of a man confronting evidence of a failure that was technically his steward's and practically his own. "Show me," he said. She showed him. They walked the eastern cottages together in the rain, and she explained the structural problems and the repair plan, and he asked questions that confirmed understanding and occasionally suggested solutions she had not considered. "You identified this in your first year," he said, looking at the survey notes. "It is in the original inventory." "It is," she said. "I recommended the work in the second year. The recommendation was in the household report I submitted that March." He was quiet. "I do not recall the recommendation," he said. "No," she said. She did not add what lived beneath the no, which was that he had not recalled it, because he had not read it, because he had granted her authority, and then treated it as something functioning that did not require his attention. He heard it anyway. "I should have read it," he said. "Yes," she said. "You should have." They walked back to the hall. He walked beside her rather than ahead of her, which was different from county events, where the half-step ahead was social convention and also the physical expression of the distance he maintained as policy. That evening, after dinner, after the usual courteous exchange in the drawing room, after she had retired to her rooms, she heard the sound. Not the connecting door. Something smaller. A knock. On the sitting room door, the one that opened to the corridor, the formal door. She opened it. He was standing in the corridor with a piece of paper in his hand, which she recognized as the first-year inventory, the original survey report she had written, with the cottage recommendations underlined in her handwriting. "I found it," he said. "In the household files in the study. You were right. About the cottages, about all of it." She looked at the paper. She looked at the man holding it. She thought about years of inventories and reports and recommendations, carefully written and carefully filed and carefully not read, and about a man who had gone to the study after dinner and searched through the files until he found the one that proved she had been right, and had brought it to her door at 10 o'clock at night, which was the most significant thing he had done in their marriage, and he had done it holding a piece of paper about roof repairs. "Thank you," she said. "I'm going to read them," he said. "The reports. All of them. From the beginning." She held his gaze. "There are quite a lot of them." "I expect there are," he said. He looked at the paper. He looked at her. The corridor was quiet. The house was quiet. The particular silence of Donover Hall at night was for the first time occupied by something other than absence. "Good night, Sable," he said. Her name, not the Duchess, not Madam. Her name, spoken in the corridor outside her sitting room with a years-old inventory in his hand, and the expression of a man who was beginning to understand what he had not been reading. "Good night, Your Grace," she said. She closed the door. She stood behind it for a moment. She thought about the connecting door, and about the corridor door, and about a man who had come to the formal entrance when the private one had been available for years, and what that meant about the distance he was trying to cross and the route he had chosen to cross it. She thought, "He said my name." She thought, "It is not enough." She thought, "It might be the beginning of enough." The spring assembly at Hartfield House was the first large gathering of the season. 45 people, the full county. The drawing rooms opened into each other to create the long reception space that Lady Hartfield preferred for occasions she intended to be remembered. Sable arrived alone, which was not unusual. She wore the dark blue her brother Taryn had sent from London in January, cut by someone who understood that color on a woman who had spent years wearing appropriate things could itself become a statement. She had not worn it before. She was not entirely certain why she was wearing it now, except that Cressida's sentence was still on the desk, and she had looked at the dove gray she usually wore and had thought, with a clarity that surprised her, no. The evening proceeded. Sable moved through the room with practiced ease, talking with Mrs. Brevitt about the spring planting, with the Fenton daughters about the London season, and with Colonel Alsted about the county militia. She was aware, as she had learned to be aware at these events, of where the Duke was in the room. He was managing his quadrant with the care she recognized, the careful distribution of attention that ensured everyone felt acknowledged and no one felt chosen. She had been on the receiving end of it since the wedding. She knew the technique intimately because she had been categorized within it. She was talking with Lady Hartfield and the vicar's wife about the commission's next phase when Mrs. Fenton arrived at her elbow. Mrs. Fenton was a woman of 53 who had spent those years accumulating opinions about the social order of Somerset with the dedication other people brought to scholarship. She was not cruel. She was something more durable than cruel. She was certain. "Duchess," Mrs. Fenton said with the particular smile that preceded a statement the speaker had been preparing. "We were just discussing the Charity Commission. Such admirable work. One does wonder, though." She paused. 3 people were within hearing. "Whether the commission might benefit from leadership that is more naturally connected to the county's established families. The disbursements are considerable, and there is a question of, well," another pause, "of appropriate stewardship." Sable understood the architecture of what had just been constructed. Appropriate stewardship meant that a baronet's second daughter, however competent, was not the right person to manage significant county funds, because competence without pedigree was a kind of overreach, and overreach in Somerset was the sin that mattered more than incompetence. She was composing her response when she heard his voice. "The Duchess's disbursement model," the Duke said from behind Mrs. Fenton's left shoulder, in a voice Sable had not heard before. Not the social voice, not the estate voice, but something beneath all of them. Something that had the weight of the Ashworth name in it, and the particular authority of a man who had decided that this sentence was going to end differently than Mrs. Fenton had planned, has been adopted by the Wiltshire County Commission as a model for their own relief program. Mrs. Fenton turned. The Duke was looking at her with an expression Sable recognized. The complete assessing attention, the one he had used in the study and at the commission meetings. He was using it now on Mrs. Fenton, and the effect was immediate. "The question of appropriate stewardship," he continued with the economy of a man who did not require volume, "is answered by the work. The Duchess's work on the commission has been exceptional. I believe Lady Hartfield would confirm this." "I would," Lady Hartfield said from behind Sable, with the timing of a tactician. "Without reservation." Mrs. Fenton's smile recalibrated. "Of course, I merely meant—" "The county benefits from people who take its problems seriously," the Duke said. "I think we are all agreed on that." He looked at Mrs. Fenton for one moment longer than was necessary. Then he turned to Colonel Alsted and resumed a conversation about the county road as though nothing of significance had occurred, and Mrs. Fenton found the Fenton daughters with the haste of a woman who required sympathetic company. Sable stood in the aftermath and thought about what he had done. He had known about the Wiltshire adoption. She had not told him. Lady Hartfield had not told him. He had found out on his own, which meant he had been paying attention to her work beyond the Tuesday meetings, which meant the attention she had catalogued as absent had been present in ways she had not detected. She crossed the room to Lady Hartfield, who was standing near the fireplace with quiet satisfaction. "He knew about Wiltshire," Sable said. "He did," Lady Hartfield said. "I did not tell him." "No. He asked me, 3 weeks ago, specifically about the Commission's external recognition and your contribution." She looked at Sable directly. "I have known Edmund Ashworth for 20 years. He does not ask questions about people he is not watching." Sable looked across the room at the Duke, who was still in conversation and still not looking at her. "He has been watching for some time," Lady Hartfield said. "He is a man who requires a considerable volume of evidence before he revises a position. I believe the volume has been reached." Sable held her glass and thought about a man who had just used the weight of the Ashworth name, the heaviest thing he possessed, and had put it behind her. She looked across the room at him. He looked back. Not the courteous attention. The other one. The one she had seen on the 6th Tuesday over the ink-stained hand, and at the Eastern cottages in the rain, and at the corridor door at 10 o'clock at night. She held his gaze for 2 seconds longer than the room required. Then she turned back to Lady Hartfield and said something about the Commission's next meeting, and the assembly continued around them, and neither of them said anything further that evening about what had happened, and the not saying cost them both considerably. He came to the library on a Monday morning, 4 days after the assembly, which was fast enough to mean something had been decided. She was at the desk. She was always at the desk on Monday mornings. She did not look up when the door opened, because the door opened regularly, and she had trained herself to finish the sentence she was writing before acknowledging interruptions. She finished the sentence. She looked up. He was standing inside the door with the expression she had seen at the corridor that night, the one that had nothing managed in it, and he was holding a bundle of papers she recognized immediately. Her reports, the household reports, the estate recommendations, the quarterly reviews she had written and submitted and filed for the duration of their marriage. He was holding all of them. "I have read them," he said. She set down the pen. She looked at the thickness of the bundle, which represented years of careful work, submitted to a man who had granted her authority, and then looked away. "All of them," she said. "All of them." He set the papers on the desk. The cottage recommendations, the tenant rotation analysis, the kitchen garden proposal, which was better than my steward's plan. All of them. He paused. "And I want to say something about the fact that I did not read them when you wrote them." She waited. "I was wrong," he said, looking at the desk rather than at her. "Not wrong in the way that can be corrected by a single adjustment. Wrong in the way that requires an accounting of what it cost." He met her eyes. "It cost you. The not reading, the not seeing, you doing extraordinary work in this house, and my treating it as a function rather than recognizing it as you. Sable, the woman who has been running this estate better than I have, and who has been doing it without once asking me to notice, which was not patience. It was the conclusion you had drawn about whether noticing was something I was capable of." She looked at him. She thought about closed doors and courteous distance, and a man who had just named the architecture of their silence honestly, without deflection. "I had drawn that conclusion," she said. "Yes." "Was it correct?" "It was correct," she said, "until very recently." "I cannot undo what has passed," he said. "No, you cannot. I can read the reports from now, and I can tell you that the woman who wrote them is not someone I overlooked because she was insufficient. She is someone I overlooked because I was afraid that seeing her clearly would require me to be seen clearly in return. And I had concluded, after Clarion and Miss Holt and Dinah, that being seen clearly was the thing that ended." She looked at him for a long moment. She thought about a man who had proposed to 4 women and been rejected by 3, and had married the 4th with the specific intention of never being vulnerable again, and was now standing in her library, naming the intention for what it was. "Edmund," she said. He stilled. She had not used his name before. The entirety of their marriage had been your grace, and the Duke, and the careful distance of a woman who had been given a title and not permission to use the name underneath. "Yes," he said. "I am going to say something, and I need you to hear it completely." He waited. "I have not been waiting for you to see me," she said. "I stopped waiting in the 4th year. What I have been doing since is deciding whether to leave." The word filled the library. "I know," he said. "I found the letter." "What letter?" "Cressida's, the sentence about happy and accomplished. I read it in March, when I was searching for the inventory report. It was the reason I went to the study that night and searched until I found the first-year survey." She thought about the night he came to her door with the inventory, the corridor and her name, and the formal entrance instead of the private one. "The connecting door," she said. "Yes. All these years. Because the 3 women before you taught me that opening doors was how you lost people," he said. "And I decided that keeping the door closed was how I would keep you. And the distance has been the thing I was losing you to. And I have known this, Sable. And I am saying it now because I stood in a room and told Mrs. Fenton that your work was exceptional, and it was the first true thing I have said about you in public. And it was not enough, but it was the beginning of what I owe you." She looked at him. She looked at the reports. She looked at the connecting door, visible from the library if you stood at the right angle, down the corridor, closed as it had been every night. "I am not your 4th choice," she said. "No, you are not." "I was. When you proposed, I knew it, and I said yes anyway, because I thought I could make it into something else through competence and patience. And I didn't see it. You are seeing it now. The question is whether now is a place we can build from, or only a place where we acknowledge what was lost." "I would like it to be the former," he said. "Very much." She looked at him. Then you will need to open the door, she said. Not the connecting door, the one inside yourself, the one that decided after Dinah Welford that the safest marriage was the one conducted at the greatest distance. You will need to open it and keep it open, because I said yes in a drawing room, and I have been on my side of every door in this house since, and the next opening belongs to you. He looked at her for a long time. Yes, he said. It does. It meant, I am choosing this, and I know what it costs. The commission meeting is Thursday, she said. We should review the accounts tomorrow. He turned toward the door. He stopped. The blue, he said. At the assembly, you wore the blue. I had not worn it before. He looked at her. It was noticed, he said. And then he left, and she sat at the desk and thought about what it meant when a man who had spent years not noticing said it about a dress she had chosen on the morning she decided to stop being invisible. The months between the library conversation and the Wednesday night in September were not dramatic. They were something more difficult. They were gradual. He read the reports. Every week, the new ones returned with notes in his hand, observations, questions, the handwriting of a man who wanted the attention to be visible. The reports became a conversation on paper, running parallel to the spoken conversations that were also changing, the way rivers change their course. He began appearing in rooms he had not previously occupied: the morning room, the garden, the library in the evenings, where he now read in the chair across from hers, with the quiet company of a man learning to be present without requiring the presence to have a purpose. The county noticed. The Ashworths arrived at the May assembly in the same carriage, which was the first time since the wedding. The Duke had been seen walking the grounds with the Duchess on 3 consecutive afternoons. She learned that he had nightmares about the connecting door, that the room beyond it was empty. He learned that she wrote letters to Cressida every Sunday, where she put the things she could not say in the house. She learned he had kept every estate letter she had ever written him, filed in the bottom drawer on his side of the desk. He learned she had memorized the sound of his footsteps in the corridor, and that the listening was the thing she was most ashamed of, because it meant she had never actually stopped waiting. These things were said over weeks, incrementally, with retreats and advances. The Wednesday in September arrived without announcement. Sable had not planned it. She had been sitting at the writing desk at 9 o'clock, reviewing the autumn planting, when Cressida's latest letter arrived by the evening post. Cressida wrote, "If you are staying because leaving would be an admission that the arrangement failed, then you are staying for the wrong reason, and you know it, and I think it is time to stop knowing it quietly." Sable read this sentence once. She had been moving toward it for months. The arrival on paper did not create the decision. It clarified a decision already made in the part of her that was not patient and not accomplished and not competent. The part that wanted to be happy and had concluded on this Wednesday evening that happiness was not available in this house, behind this door. She opened the trunk. She packed the traveling dress. She wrote the letter to Taryn. She was kneeling beside the trunk when the door opened. Not the connecting door, the corridor door. He opened it without knocking. "Sable," he said. She looked up. She did not stand. She held his gaze with the expression that had nothing left to manage. "I have written to my brother," she said. "The carriage is arranged for first light." He looked at the trunk. He looked at the traveling dress. He looked at the writing case. "No," he said. She stood. "No is not yours to say." I know. His voice was not the managed one. It was not any voice she had catalogued. It was raw, and the rawness frightened her, not because it was unfamiliar, but because it was the thing she had been waiting for, and it had arrived at the moment she had decided to stop waiting. "I know it is not mine to say," he said. "I am saying it anyway, not as a command. as the man who has spent years keeping a door closed because he was afraid that what was on the other side would leave, and has managed to make it leave by keeping it closed, which is the precise outcome I was trying to prevent. And I can see that now, and I need you to know that I can see it. You can see it because I am packing, she said. You could not see it yesterday. I could see it yesterday. I have been able to see it since March, since the inventory, since I read your sister's letter and understood that you were deciding, and I have been. He stopped. I have been trying to find the way to say what I am about to say, and I have not found it, and I am going to say it badly, and I need you to hear it anyway. She looked at him. The trunk was open between them. The room was lit with the bright, active light of decision. Say it, she said. You were never my last choice, he said. You were my last attempt. There is a difference, and I did not understand the difference until I was standing in your library, holding the reports I should have read. And I understood that the woman who wrote them wasn't the woman I had settled for. She was the woman I had been too afraid to choose, and so I had arranged the choosing to look like settling, because settling was safe, and choosing was the thing that had broken me 3 times before. She felt the weight of it, the specific gravity of a man who had just named the central lie of their marriage. You chose safety, she said, and called it an arrangement. Yes. And I accepted the arrangement because I believed that competence would eventually make you see me. Yes. And it was not enough. It wasn't enough to make me see you, he said. Because I was not looking. Not because there was nothing to see. Because looking was the thing I had decided was dangerous. She looked at the trunk. She looked at the letter to Taryn. I'm tired, she said. I'm tired of being excellent in an empty house. I'm tired of managing a marriage that does not require me to be a person. I'm tired of the connecting door. I know, he said. Do you? She said. He crossed the room. He stood on the other side of the open trunk and looked at her with the full, undefended expression, entirely present and entirely terrified. I have not slept well since we married, he said. The nightmares. You know about them. Mrs. Croyne told you in the 4th year. I asked her what you said, and she said you said nothing. And the nothing frightened me most, because it meant you had decided my nightmares were not your concern. What are the nightmares about? She said. The connecting door. In the nightmare, it is open, and the room on the other side is empty. I wake up, and the door is closed, and I do not know which is worse. She looked at him. She thought about years of listening for his footsteps and being accomplished instead of happy, and about a man who had nightmares about a door he could not open and a room he was afraid to find empty. Edmund, she said. Yes. Close the trunk. He looked at her. He looked at the trunk. He looked back at her. Close it, she said, and then open the door. He closed the trunk. The clasps clicked in the quiet room, precise and final. He walked to the connecting door. He put his hand on the handle. He turned it. The door opened. It opened onto the corridor between their rooms, the short passage she had walked 1,000 times, the one she had measured in footsteps and silence, and the particular quality of listening for someone who never came. He looked at her through the open doorway. She looked at him. The room on the other side was not empty. Sable, he said. She crossed the room. She stood in the doorway. She put her hand on the doorframe, flat and deliberate, the hand with the ink stain on the 3rd finger. I am not staying because leaving is an admission, she said. I am staying because you opened the door. He took her hand, the one on the doorframe, and held it with the grip she remembered from the drawing room at Marin House, except this time he did not let go. He kissed her. It had the honesty of a man who had spent years maintaining a distance and had just dismantled it. And the dismantling could not be reconstructed and was not meant to be. She kissed him back, and the connecting door was open, and the trunk was closed, and the traveling dress was still on the bed, and none of it was needed anymore. When they separated, she kept her hand in his. "The reports," she said. "You will continue reading them." "Everyone," he said. "And the connecting door stays open." He looked at the door. He looked at her. "It stays open." "Good," she said. "Now come to the library. We have accounts to review, and I have opinions about the autumn planting that you are going to find inconvenient." "I have no doubt," he said. She walked through the open doorway. He followed. She wrote to Taryn the following morning, canceling the carriage and the arrangement, in a letter that was brief and did not explain, because Taryn would understand the absence of explanation as its own answer. What followed was not a courtship. They had been married for years. What followed was the thing that should have happened from the beginning, and was now happening with the compressed intensities of two people making up for lost time, while pretending they were simply continuing a committee project. The county observed this with satisfaction. Lady Hartfield mentioned to Mrs. Brevet that the Ashworths had arrived at the Michaelmas dinner in the same carriage, sitting beside each other rather than at opposite ends of the table. Lady Hartfield received them with composure. "Together," she said, looking at them both. "We have commission business to discuss with Colonel Alstead," Sable said. "Of course you do," Lady Hartfield said. Her brother Taryn came from London in October. He arrived at Dohnavur with the assessing attention of a man who had received a letter arranging his sister's departure and a second letter canceling it, and who wanted to see for himself what had changed. He saw the Duke hold a door for Sable with the specific attention of a man aware of where she was going. He saw the way Edmund looked at her across the dinner table, the full focused attention. He saw the commission report annotated in 2 hands, and the library in the evening. 2 chairs, 2 books, and the quality of silence that was no longer absence, but presence. "You are staying," Taryn said on the second morning. "I am staying," she said. "Because he changed, or because you decided to accept what he was offering?" "Because he opened a door," she said. "And because what was on the other side was not what either of us expected." "And what was on the other side?" "Him," she said. "Without the distance, which is a different person than the one I married, and also the same person, and I have decided to stop requiring them to be simple." "Is he good enough for you?" Taryn said. She thought about the question honestly. "He is becoming so," she said. "Which is the only version of the answer I trust." Mrs. Fenton congratulated them at the November assembly with the grace of a woman who had been comprehensively corrected. She said the correct things to Edmund first, and then to Sable, and Sable met her eyes with composure, and nothing further was required. Edmund beside her said nothing. His hand touched hers briefly, 2 fingers against her wrist, not visible to the room, entirely for her. Christmas at Dohnavur Hall was, by tradition, a formal occasion. This year the ceremony was different, and the difference was visible to everyone who attended. Sable had spent 6 Christmases at Dohnavur. The first had been the wedding Christmas, managed and correct and lonely. The subsequent ones had been variations on the same theme. The 7th was the first one she decorated herself. The library, where she placed holly she had cut from the grounds. The morning room, where she arranged winter flowers. The connecting corridor, where she hung a single sprig of something green and fragrant that she did not name, and he did not ask about, and both of them understood. Edmund found her in the library on Christmas Eve, arranging the last of the holly. "You have changed the library," he said. "I have decorated the library," she said. "The library itself remains structurally intact." The library has been structurally revised since approximately March. The books have been reorganized. The books were in no discernible order. I applied one. You applied your order. My order is discernible, she said, which makes it an improvement. He looked at her with the expression that had nothing of the arrangement in it, and everything of the man she had discovered behind it. The county arrives tomorrow, he said. 40 people. The full occasion. I'm aware. I organized it. I know. He paused. Sable, I want to do something tomorrow, at the dinner. Publicly. I want you to know in advance, because you do not like surprises in public settings. She looked at him. What do you want to do? I want to introduce you, he said. Not as the Duchess. As Sable. My wife. She was quiet. She thought about years of the Duchess and the careful distance it maintained. You have never introduced me by name, she said. No, and I would like to. Tomorrow, in front of the county. Yes, she said. I would like that. Christmas dinner. 40 people. The long table. She wore the dark blue again. Edmund had not been surprised. Taryn, who had come from London, looked at her and said nothing. At the end of the meal, in the drawing room, Edmund stood. He did not tap a glass. He simply stood, and the room quieted. I would like to say something brief, he said. The room waited. Sable looked at him with the composure of a woman who knew what was coming and was not prepared for how it would feel. This house has been managed for the past years with extraordinary competence by a woman I have not adequately acknowledged. The estate, the tenants, the county work, the commission, the accounts, the drainage, the planting, the library. He paused. The pause was not theatrical. It was a man collecting himself. All of it. She has done all of it brilliantly, and I've been a fool not to say so sooner. The room was very quiet. I would like to introduce my wife, he said. Not the Duchess of Ashworth, my wife, Sable. He looked at her. She looked at him. The room looked at both of them with the attention of 40 people who understood. They were witnessing something that had been years in the making. She stood. She crossed the room to where he stood, and she took his hand. She did not curtsy. She did not bow. She simply stood beside him, holding his hand, and let the room see her. Not the competence, not the management. Her. Sable. Sable, Lady Hartfield said from her chair with warm authority. Well done. Both of you. The room exhaled. The evening continued, and the name, spoken by a duke to 40 people who had known her only as the Duchess, settled into the county record with the weight of a door that had been opened and was not going to close again. January brought the frost again, and the particular quality of a Somerset winter morning when everything was sharp-edged and clear, and there was nowhere to be imprecise. Sable was in the library, 2 chairs instead of 1, 2 reading lamps, the estate accounts annotated in 2 hands, and Cressida's latest letter, which contained a sentence she read twice. Cressida wrote, I believe you are happy now, dearest. Not merely accomplished, actually happy. It is visible even in your handwriting, which has become considerably less precise, and I mean that as the highest compliment I am able to pay. Edmund found her reading the letter. Cressida, he said. Cressida, she confirmed. She says my handwriting has deteriorated. Has it? Considerably. I attribute it to the autumn planting schedule, which required an unreasonable amount of correspondence. You attribute it to the autumn planting schedule. I do. He looked at her. She looked at him. The January morning was coming through the windows in the sharp, clear way of Somerset in winter, and the connecting door was open down the corridor, as it had been every night since September. "I want to say something," she said. "You always want to say something," he said. "It is one of your more reliable qualities." She ignored this. "When I said yes in the drawing room at Marin House, when I accepted the arrangement, I was not settling." He was quiet. "I was choosing," she said. "I was choosing a man I did not know, on the evidence available, which was that he had been hurt 3 times and was trying again. And the trying again was the quality I was choosing. I thought that a man who tried again after 3 refusals was a man who had something in him worth the risk of being the 4th. She looked at the man who had been her husband for years, and whom she had known, truly known, for 4 months, and who was standing in the room she had made hers. "I was right about the trying again," she said. "I was wrong about the timing. I thought it would take a year. It took considerably longer." "And it nearly took forever," he said. "You had the trunk packed." "I know." He came to the desk. He sat in the chair that was now his, permanently claimed. "I think about it. I think about what the house would have been." "Empty," she said. "Not empty," he said. "Full of everything you had built, and completely empty of the person who had done it. And I would have spent the rest of my life in that house, and it would have been exactly what I deserved." "It would not have been what I deserved," she said. "No, it would not." She reached across the desk. She took his hand, the ink-stained hand in the hand that had held hers through the doorway in September. "Edmund," she said. "Yes." "I'm going to revise the spring planting schedule," she said, "and the tenant rotation. Your steward's plan is adequate but not optimal. I have had a better one since the 3rd year." "Of course you have." She looked at him with the expression she wore when she was not managing anything, the one she had discovered in September, the one that had nothing of competence in it, and everything of the person underneath. "You told me I was your last choice," she said, "in the drawing room. You did not say it in those words, but it was what the arrangement meant. Last choice, last option, last attempt." "Yes," he said. "I would like to revise the terminology." "To what?" She held his hand. She looked at the library, the 2 chairs, the 2 lamps, the open door down the corridor, the January morning outside. "Final answer," she said. "Not last choice. Final answer. The one you arrive at after you have eliminated everything that does not work, and you are left with the thing that does, and you realize that the thing that works is not what you settled for. It is what you were looking for the entire time and did not recognize because you were looking for the wrong qualities." He looked at her for a long moment. "Final answer," he said. "I accept the revision." "It is a correction," she said. "I accept the correction, along with the planting schedule and everything else you have been right about since the 3rd year." She stood. She came around the desk. He stood. They were very close in the Dunover library, in the January light, with the accounts, and the letter, and the open door, and the years behind them, and the rest of it ahead. She put her hand on his chest, flat and deliberate, over the place where the heart was. "The best decisions," she said, "are the ones you understand better after you have made them than before." "Your father says that," he said. "My father is correct about most things," she said. "It is a family quality." He covered her hand with his. "Sable," he said, and her name in his voice had everything in it, and none of it was a wound anymore. "Edmund," she said. The January morning went on around them, clear and sharp and unhurried, and entirely indifferent to whether any of it had been an arrangement. And the answer they had both concluded was that it had been, just not in the way either of them had understood in that drawing room in September of 1805. The best arrangements, it turned out, were the ones that stopped being arrangements and became choices. And the choosing, once it happened, was worth every year it had taken to arrive. She understood this completely, And for the first time in her marriage, completely was not a word she applied to her work. It was a word she applied to her life.